You and I left a good life behind a long time ago, my friend.
John Wick Chapter 4 is the latest installment in the popular action franchise. John Wick, played once again by Keanu Reeves, has returned. And, once again, he is working to fight for his freedom, but he now faces a new foe, the Marquis de Gramont, played by Bill Skarsgård, who, at the request of the High Table, is willing to use any and every tool at his disposal to bring Wick down for good, including turning old friends into enemies. One of the things this series has been consistently fantastic at is providing nerve-pounding, exciting, and brutal fight set pieces that put the V in violence. It seems with each and every film, everyone seems more than willing to up their game to try to provide some excellently choreographed fight scenes. And yeah, obviously this is no exception. In a standout sequence that might actually stand as the greatest set piece in the entire franchise to date, and that is saying something, we are treated to a 2-minute scene showcasing John taking on hordes and hordes of baddies from a bird's eye perspective. It is a visual feast and allows us, in a way that hasn't really been done up to this point, to simultaneously soak in the mayhem and carnage on screen and disassociating ourselves from it as well. It's an incredible piece in which the director, the camera crew, the stuntman, and the choreographers all deserve all the praise that they get for it. While there's not quite as many fight scenes in here as you would think, the film more than makes up for it by stretching them to their absolute breaking point, and then providing gaps in between to give the audience a rest. It is for this reason that the film is over 2.5 hours long. But thankfully, even for a film as long as this one, the pacing is sparse. It's always on the move and keeps the story flowing with good momentum. If anything, I actually kind of feel like there were times where the story moved a hair too quickly, and it probably needed a little bit extra time, but that's largely a nitpick. And like the other John Wick films, there is this exploration of the kind of man that John is. If he does somehow manage to earn his freedom, what would he even do with it? Is killing all that he really has left? Does that make him more of a man or a monster? Not necessarily the deepest themes in the world, but they handle them rather well. And then this film also continues and adds on to the world building that was established in the previous films. And the more we spend time in this world, the more we realize just how pervasive the criminal world really is. Watching people get shot and get run over by cars is just a common everyday occurrence for the regular citizens here. And yeah, it's always fun to watch the typical John Wick tropes in full swing. The bad guys that can't hit John even when they should, John Wick surviving hits and falls so bad that you wonder if he's an actual literal god, and the morons in the underworld who haven't figured out that maybe trying to go after John Wick for a quick payday isn't worth your life. In fact, this one adds an extra twist on top of that, with one character who actually does take part in killing some of the assassins that are trying to get John, because, hey, he wants that reward money for himself, and he's not going to get it if they're the ones that kill him. That one detail alone actually gives this a bit more of a level of realism to the world that they've created, and provides some character to what are ordinarily faceless mooks whose sole existence in these films is to be cannon fodder. And some of the scenarios that the characters find themselves in are rather interesting. How they're essentially pawns being used by the High Table and are forced to turn on and be pitted against friends. It creates this ambiguity of the motivations between the characters that, yeah, we've seen explored before in this franchise, but never like this, at least not to this degree. Bill Skarsgård as the main villain is good. He's a more than passable, competently written villain, although I'm not really sure why people are saying that he's the best villain of this franchise. I mean, he does a good job at playing a twerp that you want to smack across the face, but I don't think he really carries himself in a way that a villain that yields this much power should have. I'm just not convinced that he would be able to persuade the High Table to give him every single resource at their disposal. And I guess I can use this opportunity to segue into some of my issues with this film. I see a lot of people declaring this to be an action masterpiece and the best of the John Wick franchise, but I don't agree. This is the first John Wick film where I actually have some serious concerns. For once, the writing was a problem for me. Not problems big enough to sink the film that much, but enough that it gave me some genuine pause. Probably my largest complaint with this film was the ending. Not necessarily what happened, but the way it happened. It just didn't feel right, like the film wasn't really trying to build up to its own conclusion, which was exasperated by its limp-listed refusal to actually commit fully to its own payoff. And I know precisely why they did it this way, but still, it just wasn't handled in a way that I felt was satisfactory. And to be honest, that's not the film's only problem when it comes to writing either. The film basically tries to act like the last 5 minutes of John Wick 3 just didn't happen. I mean, it's not like it ignores it entirely, but with the cliffhanger that the last film ended on, I thought this film was going to go in a certain direction, and aside from one scene, it just frustratingly doesn't. Instead, it basically retreads the ground of the third film, wherein John tries to earn his freedom, just, using a different method. And because of that, assuming they don't have plans for a fifth film, you could theoretically skip the third film and not miss much of anything. In fact, skipping the third film would probably make this film even better, because it would make certain character decisions a lot easier to swallow. Which sucks, because the third one is actually my favorite of the franchise. This is the film where it was most obvious that they didn't really have much of a plan beyond a single film at a time. They clearly didn't know what to do with what they set up for themselves, so they decided to backtrack as quickly as they could. And while not a huge complaint, this is still a distraction that I think needs to be addressed. This contains some of the worst written bits of dialogue in the entire franchise. Now, dialogue has never been a strong suit of this franchise, that it didn't really need to be, but it was passable. Here, though, some of the lines were so poorly written, I actually stopped and thought to myself, did they really just say that? So, yeah, I would say this is easily, and I do mean easily, the weakest of the series so far. But keep in mind, the weakest in a franchise as strong as this is still really good. I mean, what am I supposed to say? Tell people not to go see this? These beautiful, dazzling set pieces, the gorgeous kinetic violence, and the impressive stunt work, especially if they're fans of this franchise, that's just not going to happen. It delivers precisely where it matters the most. And yeah, while I do wish the writing for this was more up to snuff, and I was frustrated with its refusal to commit with what its previous entry had set up, I did have myself a good time. The 2 hour and 40-minute runtime just flies by. This contains some of the best action you will see in the cinema all year, and that alone is worth the price of admission. John Wick Chapter 4 gets a full shot. That review you just heard was an excerpt from my weekly review show This Weekend, where I review 5 brand new movies every single weekend. If you would like to check that out, then make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss it. And as always, if you want to see more of my reviews, you can check out my Letterboxd account. The link is in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.